when the very famous and outstanding author Wolfgang Amadeus Goethe wrote that outstanding piece of literature, which is often shown as a film and known as Goethe's Faust. In one of his dialogues, as if he were pretending to be the character of Satan or the devil, cross-examining God the Almighty, he said something like this: Du hast Menschen gemacht, tierischer als Tier zu sein. Perhaps he himself never anticipated that approximately 100 years later, or perhaps 100 and a year later, somebody would be elected, even by majority, as a Reichskanzler, or as a Reichschancellor, as we call in English. A person who was not even born in that country, but in the neighboring one, who himself had been imprisoned, and during the course of his imprisonment, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which would endeavor to mislead not merely thousands or hundreds of thousands, but perhaps millions of people to lead a life which would lead to destruction of their own country, their own people, and their own nations. I explicitly use the expression in plural. As I already mentioned, he was not born in that country, but in the neighboring one. I'm referring to none other than that vicious, that satanic dictator, initially called Adolf Schicklgruber, later known as Adolf Hitler, who adopted the surname of his stepfather. This very moment, this very day, at least in Auschwitz, it is known as the very day of Holocaust throughout the world, but at Auschwitz especially. The 80th anniversary of the Day of Liberation, initially by the Red Army of the Soviet Union. This is not merely a memorial day. It is a day of warning to all of us who claim to be human beings, an endeavor to follow the path of true humanity, that we ought to be cautious every single moment of our life, that dark chapter of history, of the dark ages, or I should say that very dark age, lasting from the years 1933 till 1945, with consequential sufferings for millions of people even thereafter, ought never to be forgotten nor to be disregarded, nor to be overlooked, because that age most certainly left one of the most vicious marks in the history of humankind as a whole. Alone in Auschwitz, more than 1.1 million people were slaughtered, if I may use the expression in speech marks or in inverted commas. Most of them were tortured to death, even in vicious and dreadful gas chambers, which exposed the crystals of one of the most vicious and torturing pesticides which killed millions of people elsewhere as well. The people were not merely gassed to death in grave tormentation, but many thousands and thousands of people were also shot. Even when the vicious Nazi soldiers were marching, those feeble victims, many of whom were totally exhausted and were unable to march along, they shot brutally, heartlessly, without any mercy to those victims in their captivity. Contrary to natural justice and equity, and most certainly contrary to humanity as a whole. This is a day we ought to bear in mind that, disregarding the situation arising between the years 1933 and until that vicious dictator Adolf Hitler committed suicide, world disregarded too long to come forward to the aid and the rescue of the victims, which maintained that dark age to become darker and darker as minutes went by, as hours went by, as days went by, as months went by, even as years went by. If we claim to be human beings befitting our human births, then we must follow the course of humanity, remembering the fact, the indisputable fact, the undeniable fact, the most obvious fact that if we ignore situations which give rise to inhumanity, which give rise to dictatorial regimes to rule over the weak, the feeble, the just, then we bring upon our own selves not merely shame and disgrace, but also sufferings. There would not be any necessity to drop atom bombs in Japan if the Imperial Japan did not join the vicious Nazi regime. Mussolini would not have to hang after his being executed upside down if Italy did not join the vicious regime of Adolf Hitler. The world would be a much better world for the people of Germany and all the friends of Germany if the world did not wait too long to intervene. The 27th of January of the Gregorian year 1945 was most certainly not merely a memorial day, but a day to be appreciated by all who believe in humanity or believed in humanity even on that particular day. Yet, the rescue for the victims came too late. Too many of those captives were already dead before the Red Army could reach the concentration camp of Auschwitz on January the 27th, 1945. I beg your pardon. This was not merely a horrific day, but horrendous day. A day on which people recognized how bad the evil can be, how horrendous the nature of evil can take or could take, because of our lack of recognizing the sufferings of our fellow global citizens. The warning ought not to be disregarded. The victims who died, may they rest in peace. May they no longer and never again have to face that dreadful moment, even the very moment, each and every single moment of each and every single victim's death, that horrendous death. Yet those of us who are alive today, born after that particular period of time, need to remember that particular day, even that particular age, even those particular years and moments of their sufferings. And while thanking our Creator, God the Almighty, we need to stand up for justice, in pursuit of justice, walking upon the true path of humanity. If we do not do so, if we refuse to do so, we disclaim the right of being human beings, claiming to be human beings, the right to be called the superior, the most superior of all creation by our Creator, God the Almighty. We even disclaim the very right endowed upon us by our Creator, even in our human births. This is my errand, my most regretful and most mournful greeting on this particular day of Holocaust, which I crave leave to extend to all my fellow global citizens, wherever they may be, those who are alive, even at this very moment. While I pray and hoping in faith that never again any of us living on this earth, even today, be confronted with such a moment. The moments of so many years confronted by those victims, even at the concentration camp in Auschwitz. Bidding you, all of you, every single one of you, the protection of the same God Almighty, who created all of us, and inviting you most humbly, with all due respect, to come forward and speak out against injustice lawfully. Thank you and good night from our country.